Hey guys, it's Raven. So this is a new series here on my channel to help aspiring artists better understand what defines an art style. Growing up with DeviantArt and Instagram, art styles kind of seemed to be this level of skill that I just couldn't wrap my head around. And now that my brain's a little bit bigger, I hope I can spare you some of the struggles that I went through. These episodes will be primarily for digital artists, but traditional artists should have some content to absorb by the end of it, so don't let that discourage you. Before we jump in, we need to look at the building blocks of an art style. For simplicity, I've broken it down into 5 categories: line work, coloring style, color palette, subject matter, and a difficulty between 1 and 10, 10 being the hardest, 1 being the easiest. To those of you who may not be familiar with some of these terms, I'll give you a quick rundown. Line work, as an example, would be the type of marker used, the color of the marker used, and the texture of the marker used to outline an image. The coloring style, as an example, would be like a Renaissance painting, lots of shading and detail versus anime shading, one blocky color. The color palette is the shade, tints, and hues used primarily in the images. The difficulty is a score that I've come up with, assuming the individual artist trying this style understands the basic fundamentals of digital art, meaning that you know how to use a tablet, the art program, and layers. Maybe you'll agree with me on these rankings, maybe you won't. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Okay, so now that we've got the outline done here, let's jump into our first art style study, the ever-popular Studio Ghibli. Ghibli is known for enchanting us with their beautiful scenery and cute characters. But what can we learn from this art style? These examples may vary per film, like Princess Kaguya versus Spirited Away. For consistency's sake, we're going to be taking a look at images from Ghibli's 2004 film, Howl's Moving Castle, and their more recent 2010 film, The Secret World of Arrietty. Both films are years apart, but we can see some pretty fantastic similarities in the art style. Let's start with the line work. Ghibli's character line work is done primarily in a thin, consistent, solid black line, with the exception of Arrietty. We see that the line work is colored differently where the light is most aggressive. And whereas there was an opportunity to change the outline color in our example of Howl's Moving Castle, we don't see that aggressive lighting. Now, this might be because the movies were years apart and budgets changed, but overall, other than that, the style has stayed fairly consistent. Moving on, we don't see any lines thicker than others, no line work shading, cross-hatching, or effects. A good example of shading with line work, for those of you unfamiliar, would be panty and stockings with garter belt. Here we see the line work changes width continuously. There are areas in the shading that are done by the line work itself. This would be known as the line weight. As for line work in the backgrounds, there's virtually none. The backgrounds are painted realistically, so you'd be hard-pressed to find any hard outlines unless it was something that was going to be animated. Take this scene from Arrietty, where both characters are beautifully outlined in a solid, black, consistent line. But we also see the tea tray is outlined as well. For those of you familiar with this scene, the tray does eventually get moved. All stagnant items in the images are painted without an outline, but those to be animated do have an outline. So what is Ghibli's art style for line work? A steady, consistent, solid black line. That's it. It's very simple. Moving on, let's take a look at Ghibli's coloring style. Perhaps the most iconic part of their art style is their use of colors. Let's start with the characters. For characters, we can break it down into 3 steps. Step 1, a flat base color. Step 2, a more saturated, darker tone of that base color for shading. The shading is done similarly to the line work in a clean, crisp line. There's no added texture, there's no blurring, there's no smudging. Step 3, the lighting. This is a full color shift upwards into a cooler color or a warmer color depending on the base color. Now, this might be easier for digital artists to understand, but let me show you what I mean. So here, I'm just going to take my dropper tool and we're going to look at Howl's hair. It's this gorgeous dark blue. Let's take a look at the shade. A huge jump down in the saturation and shade. Now let's take a look at the highlight. we see a full movement upwards in the color wheel. It goes up towards a cooler color, and we lose a lot of that saturation, and we gain a lot of brightness. Now, when it comes to character colors, we see about 2 colors per part of the character. So any major area like the skin, the feathers, the outfit, 2 colors for each part. Now, this is a major contrast with the background coloring style. The background doesn't hold back on using 6, 10 different shades for one object. This makes the characters really stand out. Now, when it comes to the coloring style for the background, we see no outlining, lots of complex shading. It's very vibrant and beautiful and very difficult to recreate. From here, let's move on to the color palette. Ghibli loves to use very saturated backgrounds, and whereas you may think the characters' colors are slightly muted in comparison, they're just as saturated. Ghibli strays away from pure colors at the maximum saturation and maximum brightness, like pure white or pure black other than the outlining. They tend to stick in this range. They use a fantastic balance of warm and cool colors. You won't find any neon colors in Ghibli's style, besides maybe some effects, but characters and backgrounds stay in a fairly neutral palette. Okay, now we're on point 4, subject matter. Now, subject matter would probably be a better example for an independent artist and maybe not an animation company, so I apologize. I did want to include it though, because I will be using this in the future as well. But for subject matter in Studio Ghibli, we see a huge variety. Unlike an individual artist who may focus on drawing only female characters or only cars, Ghibli draws a little bit of everything. To wrap things up here, let's talk about the overall difficulty for an artist to duplicate the Ghibli style. Since Ghibli arguably has 2 different styles, one for the characters and one for the backgrounds, I'll rate them separately. For a beginner artist, again, one who understands their tablet, program, and using the basic tools, I'd say that the character art style is about a 5 out of 10 difficulty. If you have a good understanding of anatomy and color theory, this may be even easier for you as it is for me, maybe a 3 out of 10. But for the background style, I would give it an 8 out of 10 for almost all skill ranges. Realistic digital art can be very difficult to recreate. You have to use a variety of brushes and different tools. It's very time consuming. If you understand perspective and shading, this may be a great deal easier, but it's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. Developing an art style is a little bit like puberty. It's a scary time, but I hope that this may have given you some pointers on what to look out for and what you'd like to incorporate with your own style. Your style can be a mix of anything you'd like. If you like the line work for Ghibli characters and the coloring and background of Powerpuff Girls, go for it. Mix and match, have fun. What difficulty would you rank the Ghibli style as? Did you notice anything about the style that I didn't cover? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, and if you'd like to see more of these style breakdowns, be sure to subscribe. This video is made possible by my amazing Patreons, so big thank you to Kaiser Leo, Eric Castanen, Joseph Reed, Matthew, Rags, Kyle, and William. You guys are the best. I really appreciate you. I'll see you guys again real soon. Till then, stay crafty.